Hello everyone. In today's video I want to show you how I made the faceplate for my workshop lighting controller. This controls all the lights out in my workshop. I can turn them off, turn them on, and control different presets and whatnot. I covered this project in a separate video, but for this video I wanted to cover just the faceplate itself. It is a relatively simple part, but this is the first time I've ever dealt with using double stick tape as a hold down method, so I just kind of wanted to show you what that looks like and how that all works. And I also wanted to cover a little bit about how to take a stock off-the-shelf enclosure like this and make it look all fancy and snazzy if you have access to a laser cutter and a CNC machine. So let's get started and talk about the faceplate. Here is what the lighting controller looks like up close. Here is the faceplate that we will be discussing in this video. The enclosure itself is from OKW Enclosures. This is a soft case. I've actually used this enclosure before, just the bigger version of it, in the Liger, which I made a couple of years back. This is a logging Geiger counter that I used when I went on a nice, beautiful vacation in Chernobyl. But I really like this enclosure. It has a lot of features, like you can see little rubber bumpers, it has a 9-volt battery, has this little belt clip with a wall mount. It's a really nice little enclosure, and when you add a faceplate like this, it looks like a really cool finished product. The faceplate itself was made from these pieces of aluminum that I got on eBay. These are 40,000th inch thick, and they're already pre-anodized. So if I peel this back, you can kind of see the finish on these. So it's got a nice little finish on it, and with the laser engraving, or you could use an engraver on the CNC machine as well. It gets a nice finish on it. So I'll be using these, but the first thing I need to do is cut these down to size because these are way too big. So I just need to cut it down, and then we'll mount it to the mill and start machining. When I was making the lighting controller, I test cut a prototype for the faceplate on my laser cutter out of ABS, and I'm using that here to kind of mark off the outer boundaries on these pieces of aluminum. I want to go, I don't know, maybe like a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch bigger in both directions so that I have a little bit of a lip along the outside that I can cut, but I obviously don't want to go too small because centering the piece on the mill is going to be too difficult. So once I got that all marked out, I just moved it over to the bandsaw and just cut it by hand. I don't have a table on my bandsaw. I actually got it for free. Someone was just throwing it away. So I just kind of did this by hand, and it's so thin it worked out fine. I put a block of wood in the vise, and I will end up using this to mount the faceplate too. I'm using this double-sided tape or carpet tape that I found it was Lowe's or Home Depot, one of the two. I think it's Sure Tape brand. I'll put a link down in the description. I read a lot about different types of tape, and some people like this 3M, some people like this. I just went out on a limb and just tried basic carpet tape because I heard some people had good luck with it, and it turned out to work just fine. It's kind of a little fabricy, and it's really, really sticky. So I just kind of lined up that front edge with the edge of the block, so I knew that was going to be straight. And then I used the tool in Path Pilot where you can actually kind of trace around the outside of the part while looking at your cam, just to make sure that when I was cutting the outside edge, I was always cutting some material. Good. Okay. Actually cutting the faceplate was pretty uneventful. It's a relatively simple part without really a lot of features. It's basically just the 4 holes and then the contour around the outside. I think I was doing somewhere around 20 inches per minute at the full 10,000 RPM. I didn't really want to go that aggressive because I didn't know how much I'd trust the tape to hold everything down. Somewhere through the cutting process, I realized that the adhesive on the top was actually kind of gumming up the end mill. So I paused it and took off all the tape on the front. I kind of like keeping it on there to protect the finish on the top, but it was a good move to remove it because it was kind of getting caught up and bound up in the end mill. I unfortunately didn't record the drilling operation. There was just 4 holes in the corners for the screws. I didn't record that, but On the very last hole, it did pull up the faceplate just a little bit, so if you're going to be using the double stick tape, make sure you really press it down. I would probably mount this outside of the mill and put some good weight on it before you start machining. You know, and I just tapped it down a little bit, and it probably needed a little bit more pressure to adhere to it than that. Okay, here is the faceplate off of the mill, and it turned out pretty good. It is really stuck on there, so I need to remove it. So I'm going to use a trusty heat gun, heat it up, and then hopefully just peel off the tape. It really only took about a minute or so with the heat gun before the adhesive started to loosen. If you look at it, you can actually see that it kind of started to glisten a little bit and started to melt. And at that point, I just lifted up the faceplate. It came off pretty easily, and then I peeled off the tape from the back and used a little bit of Goo Gone to clean up the back. I've read online that some people just had, you know, no way to get the adhesive off of there, and they had to like sand it off or something, but really just the Goo Gone melted it off. It just took a little bit of elbow grease with a shop towel, but that whole process maybe only took a couple minutes. Now that the faceplate has been machined, I need to modify the top of the enclosure so that the buttons and everything can poke through. I assembled the enclosure just to give it a little bit more structural integrity, put some tape around the outside, and use the passive probe to actually probe on that inside face where the faceplate would be sitting. I really wasn't sure if this was going to work, but hey, the passive probe came through and it worked, and I was able to find the center of that, and then I ran a very simple CAM program that just cut out this inside rectangle. Unfortunately, I had to run the cam a couple times because the very first time I did it, I said that I was using a 1/4 inch end mill, and it ended up being a 1/8 inch end mill, so all the dimensions were kind of off, so I had to go back and do it all over again, but it was a really easy cut, and it was a little bit easier to indicate the second time now that I had a nice big opening in the middle. I didn't put any holes on the actual top of the enclosure because I wanted to line it up with the faceplate first. So I just kind of laid the faceplate inside that recess, went over to the drill press, and drilled through those holes so I would guarantee that everything would be lined up at that point. The last and final step for the faceplate was to engrave the lettering on the top with the laser cutter. Now, I've done this many times before in my own projects and at work, and it's always turned out really nice. But for some reason with this material and the anodizing that they were using, it didn't turn out as nice as I'm used to. So I think next time I might try using the engraving tip on the CNC machine instead. And that is how I made the faceplate for my shop light controller. It is my first time ever using double stick tape as a hold down method, and I think for this type of application it works out quite well. I'm really not sure how it would work if you're actually having real cutting forces, because this is only 40,000th of an inch thick, so I really wasn't cutting that much material, and I was going relatively slow, and it's aluminum. So I'd be curious to see how this would work with a much thicker, bulkier piece that I'm going a lot faster into. But here is the tape that I use. I will try my best to put a link down in the description for this. Just go to the flooring section of Lowe's or Home Depot. Don't look in the tape or adhesive sections. Go to the flooring department and get yourself some carpet tape. And I had no issue with holding this down with wood. I like using wood as kind of my fixture plates because it's really cheap, it's really easy to use. But for my purposes, this worked out really well, and I will most likely be doing more of this in the future. If you like my videos, please check me out on Facebook. Please subscribe to my channel as well, and also check me out on Patreon. And thanks again for watching.